Hey guys, it's Cassie, and this week I'm obsessed with the history of Potterheads. I was browsing on Reddit, which just so happens to be a very common and somewhat toxic trait I have, when all of a sudden I came across this Reddit and some others that were like it. Apparently, people find it weird and somewhat disturbing for adults to obsess over a fantasy series that was made for children, and especially when these adults start waving wands around at people and yelling silly phrases.
Incendio!
And this Reddit thread got me wondering some deep philosophical questions. Is being a Potterhead normal? Why do I dream of going to Hogwarts at 25 years old? Why are Potterheads so diehard? So let's get into it. First, we're gonna take a look into history. The first Harry Potter book, The Philosopher's Stone, or for us Americans over here, The Sorcerer's Stone, and the last book came out in 2007. The first Harry Potter movie came out in 2001, and the last movie, Deathly Hallows Part 2, came out in 2011. Sweet pea, that is 14 years from the start of the first book to the end of the last movie. That means for 14 years, people were getting excited every year for something new Harry Potter to come out. Every year, it was a tradition for people to go out, get the new book or get the new movie, and that continued on for 14 years. And while these people were waiting to get their new Harry Potter book or movie, what did they do? They reread or rewatched in anticipation for the new thing that was coming out. Look at these lines. Look at these lineups. For books. Look at them. For a bookstore. Honey, this is worse than the toilet paper craze during COVID. And that was a pandemic. And then there was the creation of the Harry Potter world. This happened in 2012. So, the year after the movies ended. So you gave them another thing to look forward to. And oh my goodness, you brought the fantasy world to life, to reality. If the fans were obsessed before and they couldn't see the world in person, imagine how obsessed they became after this. So really, it was 15 years of anticipation for something new. From 1997 to 2012. It was the year 2000 when the term Potterhead really started to arise in popularity, which, in reality, that's only 3 years after the first book was released, and it's the year before the movies came out. That's pretty impressive. And of course, you guys, we can't forget the witchcraft controversy. I mean, people were so up in arms over this book. It's still banned in some countries. But I remember seeing on the news growing up, people were burning these Harry Potter books. And I mean, I guess the people lighting the books on fire thought that it was going to help prevent people from reading them. But what they didn't realize is that they were actually setting fire to the craze. I'm sorry for the bad dad joke. Now, what really is it about this series that makes these fans so diehard? I've been thinking about this for a while now. I mean, I've reread the books multiple times. I watch the movies probably every night before bed. I know people, they've had a Harry Potter wedding, or they get Harry Potter tattoos, or they name their children after characters. So what is it about this series that makes them so wild? I think with Harry Potter, it's not a place that's separate from our world. J.K. Rowling really makes you feel like the wizarding world is in our world, we just can't see it. Which I think is something that makes it stand out over other series. And it makes it easier for people to obsess over. Because it could be happening in this world. And it makes it more relatable because there's a lot of funny crossover. It's interesting and entertaining to see what a wizard would think of a muggle. How things we find very commonplace and normal are actually weird to somebody else.
What exactly is the function of a rubber duck?
So because the wizarding world and the muggle world overlap, it's actually easier for people to picture themselves in and therefore escape into that reality. Because, people want an escape sometimes. Another thing that contributed to this craze was the different ways in which the books can almost put you into a category. What's your wand? What's your Patronus? What schoolhouse are you in? People love to belong to something. And this was also during the time where BuzzFeed quizzes became very popular. With Harry Potter, you could find out what all of these things said about your personality. Am I brave like a Gryffindor? Am I ambitious and cunning like a Slytherin? Am I kind and loyal like a Hufflepuff? Am I smart like a Ravenclaw? And that has a big draw for young children and also millennials. And we're not trying to get all deep, but look at all the different ways in the world that people like to categorize themselves nowadays. With politics or with sports teams, or even whether you have Netflix or Disney Plus, people are always trying to figure each other out and sum them up. People love to belong to a bigger group. So having these things like houses, patronuses, wands, just made people feel more understood and like there were other people out there that they can fit in with. And I mean, there's so much detail in this series. There's magical creatures, there's different languages, there's whole new sports, there's spells, there's quirks about wizards and how they live versus how we live. I mean, even their camping looks different than ours, but also kind of the same. Their world is like our world, but better. There are even history books made of the wizarding world too. Like, the detail is honestly unreal. And there are so many things to obsess over. And J.K. Rowling isn't dumb. That's exactly what she wanted. Look at this quote.
If it got published, I really thought it's a book for obsessives. It's a book for the kind of people who enjoy every little tiny detail about the world, because I have every little tiny detail about the world.
And the fact that these books are targeted for young children is honestly brilliant. And J.K. Rowling wasn't the only one to do this. I mean, look, we have Hunger Games, we have Twilight, but let's be real here. J.K. Rowling did it the best. People start reading these books at a young age and then the nostalgia takes over. It becomes a core memory. And because there was 14 or 15 years of anticipation for new Harry Potter stuff, that's way longer than Hunger Games. Hunger Games had half the amount of movies and books, and people still obsess over that. So imagine how much more the Harry Potter fans have to obsess over. It was like J.K. Rowling was just throwing more meat to the wolves. Feeding the fire of obsession. And because each book takes place for a different year in Hogwarts, the reader grows alongside the characters. You watch the characters grow up. You remember, oh yeah, I remember when I was in this phase, or I am in this phase. I'm growing alongside these characters quite literally. And because you grow alongside them, it hurts all the more when they die. And the more deaths there are, the more you're invested in the characters that are still alive. And when those characters mourn, you mourn too. Guys, it gets in your head. And these books, they dealt with moral themes that were simple enough for children, but there were also hidden ones that were complex enough for adults, like the Dementors representing depression.
The Dementors are amongst the foulest creatures to walk this earth. They feed on every good feeling, every happy memory, until a person is left with absolutely nothing but his worst experiences. You are not weak, Harry.
Coping with the fear of death, like Voldemort, and what that can turn you into. Unfairness in the social classes, bigotry, hatred, Lupin representing people with illnesses like AIDS that have a stigma around them, and stereotypes, and what comes from that. And with the merch, they knew what they were doing. They still know what they're doing. Sweet Pea, have you seen the stores lately? Harry Potter stuff is coming out everywhere again, which is how you could tell that a new series was coming out. And their merch is detailed, which made everything feel even more real as a child and brought the world to life even more. One thing I have noticed about Potterheads is that the most die-hard ones probably have gone through some sort of trauma, and that's what's made them cling to the books or the movies, because they had an escape to go to, and those books helped them at a hard point in their life. And honestly, I don't really think that's a bad thing. Maybe I'm just revealing some of my hidden trauma here, but for those of you who wonder, will I still have to deal with Potterheads in the year 3079? You know what I have to say to that? Always. Get it? Always. After all this time. Always. Love you guys.